Traveling has always been an exciting part of my life. Ever since I can remember, I've been going on trips every year with my family. Last year, I decided to take a trip of my own to London. My close friend had just moved there and wanted me to come visit, so I booked a flight and flew to London a month later. After 24 hours of traveling, I finally arrived to London. At the airport, I had to take a 30-minute train ride to meet up with my friend Kingsley. The transportation system in London is huge, so it was incredibly overwhelming, especially because I didn't have a phone in case I got lost. I was so out of my element, and I felt like I was in a completely different world. When my train finally arrived to my destination, I hopped off the train and headed to meet Kingsley at the train station cafe. When I got there, he was absolutely nowhere to be found. After running around for about 2 hours, I found a payphone that allowed me to call a taxi for free. Once I got to Kingsley's house, I knocked on the front door. His Spanish roommate let me in and directed me to Kingsley's room. For about an hour, I waited anxiously for Kingsley to get there. Finally, he came storming into the house, flung his door open, and I was standing there waiting for him. Apparently, there were 2 cafes at the train station, and we were at the opposite ones. I will never forget the feeling I had when I saw Kingsley walk through the door. I was so relieved to see a familiar face in such an unfamiliar city. Everything was so foreign to me for the first few days. We visited all the sites like the London Eye, Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, and London Bridge. Everything in London is so extravagant and grand. It's one of the most beautiful places I have ever been. I was in awe my whole entire trip. We spent countless nights going to local pubs and even some amazing clubs where everyone was so friendly. The vibe in London is completely different than America, and it was so refreshing. I will always remember my first time traveling through the underground train system called the Tube. I still don't know how anyone can figure out how to get around down there. The maps are so confusing and complicated, but the transportation system is incredibly efficient. Another memory I will always remember was the night we decided to get a bunch of people together and have a midnight picnic at the Buckingham Palace Royal Park. We all stayed out until at least 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun started to rise and we realized absolutely nobody was in sight. We all walked over to the main entrance to the palace and got amazing pictures, and then we went home and passed out. We slept for a couple hours, and then we hailed a cab to Mayfair, where we had high tea and then all took naps at the Hyde Park. The most unique part about my trip to London was that I experienced London not only as a tourist, but also as a native. Kingsley had lived there his whole childhood, so he knew all of the ins and outs of the city. As the days went on, I began to feel like I was part of the culture. I got to know all of Kingsley's friends from London, and it was such an amazing feeling just to live like a true European for those 2 weeks I stayed in London. Next time I go to Europe, I definitely want to visit Paris. I want to see how their culture is and visit all the amazing sites. In the next segment, Jessica Valdez, the most traveled person I know, will tell you about her most memorable trip.
My most memorable trip is when I went to these islands off the coast of Panama called Bocas del Toro. There were these small little islands, not a lot of tourists there, not a lot of development there because there wasn't any room to develop any further. So when you were there, you felt like you were part of the culture. The locals took you on boats and showed you the different beaches. They had one beach called Starfish Beach. There was no one there and there was just starfish all over the beach. And it was one of the most beautiful places I have ever been.
Traveling is really special because it allows me to experience new things, it pushes me out of my comfort zone, and it makes me a more well-rounded person. For these reasons, I will never stop traveling.